Welcome to the Peaceful Parenting Podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Rosensweet, mom of 3 young people, peaceful parenting coach, and your cheerleader and guide on all things parenting. Each week, we'll cover the tools, strategies, and support you need to end the yelling and power struggles and encourage your kids to listen and cooperate so that you can enjoy your family time. I'm happy to say we have a great relationship with our 3 kids. The teen years have been easy and joyful, not because we're special unicorns, but because my kids were raised with peaceful parenting. I've also helped so many parents just like you stop struggling and enjoy their kids again. I'm excited to be here with you today and bring you the insight and information you need to make your parenting journey a little more peaceful. Let's dive into this week's conversation. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Peaceful Parenting Podcast. Today is an episode with me and Corey, who's one of my peaceful parenting coaches and my super important right-hand person in all things behind the scenes in our business. And Corey is here today to talk with me about sort of how we've been thinking about peaceful parenting lately. Welcome, Corey.
Thank you so much for having me again.
Yeah, no, it's always fun to have a conversation with you on this podcast. So we wanted to come on today to talk to you all about how we've been thinking about peaceful parenting, as I said, because we have been hearing, Corey and I have both been hearing from our clients and in our Facebook group and in our membership of people who think that they're doing peaceful parenting wrong, or that there's something wrong with them because it's not working like all of the books and, other things that people hear and read says it's supposed to look like, right? You're supposed to, I think the idea is you practice peaceful parenting. And then as somebody said, after a few months or however long that you've been practicing it, you are, skipping through a metaphorical field of daisies with your child by your side. And we have found that for some of you, that is totally the case, right? You get on board with a new way of doing things and you stop doing, consequences and stop yelling, or at least reduce your yelling a lot and work on your connection and, get really good at limit setting and, just choose the limits that you need to set. And you do end up skipping through that metaphorical field of daisies with your child. And then Corey, why don't you take it for some of our other people?
Well, then there's our other people like me who try and work so hard and think they're doing all of the things. And life is still so hard with our kids that we instantly think that we're failing or there's something wrong with us or our children. And it must be that we're just doing everything wrong. And it's so heartbreaking because that's just not the case. We just haven't had the full story of really what it means to peacefully parent kids with diverse needs.
Yeah. And that's why but if anyone doesn't know, we've got a summit that's hopefully we're going to get this podcast released a little bit early so that it times with the beginning of the summit, which starts on Monday, October 16th. So hopefully you're hearing it on that day and you can check it out. If you haven't signed up, it's at sararosensweet.com/summit. But that's why we put this summit together, because we just wanted to reach all of the parents who felt like they were, doing all of the things and life still feels hard because their kid is sensitive or strong-willed or spirited or neurodivergent, maybe autistic or ADHD or sensory processing challenges. Because for this, for those of you who have those kids that we're calling complex kids for lack of a better word, you can do all of the things and life still feels hard. And we really wanted you to know that doesn't mean that you're not doing peaceful parenting, right? And of course, Corey, you find that this does make things easier somewhat, right?
Oh, absolutely. So when I'm coaching parents now too, I always say peaceful parenting is at the heart of what we are doing. It just means that sometimes the tools, when we're using them, look a little bit differently than we were told they were supposed to look. But it doesn't mean that peaceful parenting itself is some sort of flawed process.
Yeah.
It just means when we're executing it, it sometimes looks a little bit different. Did you want me to share one of the biggest ones that looks different?
I'd love to hear that.
Okay, so the biggest one that I think looks different is special time. So I help you run the Peaceful Parenting membership, the office hours sometimes. And that means, once a week, we all get together virtually and we're able to answer parents' questions in real time who are in our membership. And one day when I was doing it, everybody was saying I don't think we're doing special time right. That must be why, we're having connection problems right now. And this was something that I really felt in my heart, because that is what I felt when I started peaceful parenting. I could not get my child to do special time with
And
me.
and by that you mean like, so for people who don't know, we always recommend special time is, 15 minutes of one-on-one time where you say to it's open-ended, and you say to your child, I'm all yours for the next 15 minutes. What would you like to play? And for some kids, they've got like a million ideas of what they want to play. But why don't you take it from there? I just wanted to give context for that's what we usually suggest for special time.
Yes, thank you for that. Yes, for my younger child, it works great. We're instantly Pokemon trainers and we're lost in the world of his play, and it's a beautiful thing. But with my older child, who we now know is neurodivergent, it was always painful. When we were trying to do it, it just felt hard for him and for us, and everyone ended up angry by the end of it. And so we started avoiding doing special time because we're like, this isn't working. And it felt to me almost like shame,
Because he didn't know
because,
what to do, or like what was the problem with it?
well, because he does not do imaginative play in a neurotypical way. So for him, he likes to recreate scenes that he has watched in TV or on a video game or read in a book exactly how he has seen it. So when we try and do imaginative play, he would be trying to direct me to recreate the scene with him, but I'm not in his head, so I could never do it exactly how he wanted me to.
Oh,
And
so
he
he
would
would get
get,
really frustrated.
yes, really
Mhm.
frustrated, and he'd be frustrated with me. And so we started switching every other night, where my husband would try one night and I would try the next night, and my husband couldn't figure it out either. And it just upset all of us. So we realized we just started avoiding it. And I felt really guilty about this, because I knew that in peaceful parenting, special time
Right.
is one of the most fundamental things we're supposed to do. So I abandoned it. And over time, I've come to realize and made peace with the fact that, hey, it just didn't work for us. And that's okay. Um,
Did you find something else to do instead that like filled that connection? Because the reason why we do it is because it's like a supercharged way to get connection, is like immersing yourself in your child's world. So did you find something else that works for Big C with connection?
yes. And in fact, our connection is probably the best it's ever been. What we do
And
instead,
he's 8, right?
he will be 8 at the end of
Okay,
November.
so
So
he's almost 8.
almost. Yes. What I have realized is I need to follow and engage with his special interests with him. So this is something that is really typical of neurodivergent kids, both autistic or ADHD kids, where they can, get really intense about something that they love learning. And they just, that thing is so important to them. As a neurodivergent person myself, I still do this. It's such an important part of who I am and how I live my life. So I shared a special interest with him, and I started reading to him my books. And he loved it. And so we do everything we can to find time each day to sit and read it together. And we get under my weighted blanket together, which is so, such a beautiful neurodivergent experience. We're under that blanket together. That's the one time where he gets so snuggly. He gets like right up against me, and he's holding a fidget, and I'm reading this book to him. And then we keep on pausing to like talk about what we think is going to happen next. And he asks me questions and makes connections. And then it carries on to the next day. All the next day, he just keeps talking to me about the plot and what we read. And we just keep talking about it and engaging in this together.
I love that.
It's just this beautiful thing. So take me going full circle back to office hours. We were in office hours, and everyone was talking about how special time's so hard. And I'm like, well, I'm just going to throw it out there that maybe you don't have to do it the way we thought we did.
Hmm.
And I told them this very story about this is how I engage with him. And it has so filled both of our buckets of just that connection. And it's not just when we're snuggling together, it's all throughout the day then, where we keep talking about the books and the characters. So that I gave them permission to do special time in a different way.
That's awesome.
And everyone needed that, and like breathed the sigh of relief of, okay, we can just find a different way we can engage in our children's special interests with them, instead of having this structured set time child-led play.
Hmm. I love that. Yeah, and I just to another note on connection and sort of what we're seeing differently with peaceful parenting. I think there's a lot of pressure out there for parents that they think if we're just connected enough, I'm not going to have any challenges for my child, right? Like I had these clients that I worked with last year or the year before, and their kid, I think, is quite clearly neurodivergent, but they weren't at the time, they weren't aware of that. And he was having like a lot of meltdowns. And the mom said to me, like, oh my gosh, I thought this was because I wasn't doing enough special time. Like she really thought, like, if I can get connected enough with my child, then they won't have meltdowns or they won't, I had another client once that I worked with who was working really hard on doing like connection before it was time to get ready for school. And he was like, well, I'm like playing with my daughter, but then she still doesn't want to come up and start getting ready for school. And I was like, well, connection is like amazing. And it does make kids more likely to want to cooperate with us, but it's not like a magic wand where if you're connected enough, all of your struggles and challenges go away. So I guess I just want to say, like, totally explicitly, yes, we always want to make sure that we're feeling like whenever new clients come to us, we always have sort of a check-in, like, how's your connection feeling? Because if the relationship is fraught, and for anyone listening, I want to make a point, when Corey and I are talking about connection, we're not talking about love. Like, we know you love your kid and we know they love you, but connection is like, I don't know, like connection is like a mutual understanding, caring what the other person thinks, like true respect, right? And wanting to spend time with that person. That's sort of how I see connection. And so if you're feeling like, you're not wanting to spend time with your child, or there's been a lot of fighting, then maybe, yeah, you got to work on connection. But that doesn't mean that if you work on connection enough, all your challenges are going to go away.
Yes, which brings me up to number two.
All right.
So, number two is the whole idea of the emotional backpack. So, this is such an important concept in peaceful parenting, and I believe wholeheartedly in the emotional backpack. So, this is the idea that if there's things that happen during the day that we can't process at the time, we kind of stuff them in our emotional backpack. And at some point, we need to empty that backpack. So in peaceful parenting, we'll say, you need to get your child laughing or true tears to help, empty that backpack. And that's a great idea.
And let me just
Totally.
point out, because I know what you're going to say, because you told me before, but I want to point out that we always say, like, you don't have to know what's in the emotional backpack, right? You just have to help them laugh and cry.
Yes, totally. So you have to just help them laugh and cry. And so, when you have a child with more complex needs, and like we said, we're using that word because it's the best word we can find for now, they have a lot in their emotional backpack. And I spent so much energy in the early days trying to help my child empty their backpack. And I felt like every day that backpack was just so full again that it was like a full-time job trying to empty this thing. And instead, what I'm thinking is, yes, that's important. And we need to do a lot more work on understanding, why is your child's backpack so full? And I think that's something we have to do a lot more. In the summit, you have an amazing interview with Dr. Stuart Shanker. And he's so amazing because he always talks about being a stress detective. What is causing your child so much stress? And I think that that's a really big theme throughout the summit, is helping everyone understand what the experience is like for your child. And by understanding what their experience is like, you can do a better job being a stress detective and making, their backpack just not get so full, because
Yeah,
we can
that's
better
that's
support
something that
them.
also came up when I was talking to Dr. Devin Price, and I don't think that you've listened to that one yet or watched that one, but he talks about masking, and he's the author of a book called Unmasking Autism, and he talks about masking and how, you know, we're probably not going to change the schools enough that, in, a generation, that kids are not going to have to continue to mask at school. And by masking, what, if anyone doesn't know what that is, it's like basically trying to be really, quote, good and like follow all the rules and do what is expected of you when you're in an environment that doesn't match your, how you would normally express yourself. And so masking all day at school is what often why a lot of neurodivergent kids, or even really sensitive kids, I would say, come home with a really full emotional backpack, because they've had to like hold it all together. And we've talked about that for years, you and I, and lots of people in our world. But we sort of, and so his point was like, yeah, we're not going to change things overnight, but maybe there are small things like throughout the day that can be done to help kids so that they don't have to mask as heavily, or their emotional backpack doesn't get quite as full. He mentioned a couple things like, sensory breaks, or being able to, I forget what else he said. You'll have to watch the interview to see what his other suggestions were. But basically, like, I love what you're saying of, like, how Dr. Shanker says, be a stress detective. He talks about, then when you do find out what those stress points are, how can you advocate for your child? And again, we had Heather Clark, who was like amazing, talking about being an advocate for your school. I mean, she was so fierce. So kind of like putting all these ideas together, I think, can hopefully help people that their kids' backpack maybe might not get so full.
Heather Clark's interview was so good. I can't wait for parents to listen to that one, because I actually went in to advocate for my child just channeling Heather. I felt so much more confident going in there having watched that interview, because it is hard to advocate for your child at school.
Mm-hmm. Totally. Yeah. So, okay. I wanted to also say that, just one more thing on the connection thing. I think there's also this idea that if your child is defiant, that's that you haven't been. And I actually used to say that. I feel like I have, like, wish I could go back in time and give people a different message, that, that quote of that defiance is a connection problem. I mean, it can be a connection problem, but defiance can also be, and she's not in our summit, but remember that quote from the podcast, if anyone hasn't heard the podcast with Julie Bogart, where she said defiance is like a child drawing a line in the sand and saying, this is who I am. And I just love that. And we actually touched on that a lot in the interview with Dana, I think, with Dana Abraham, talking
Yes.
about limits. And, I think that's one thing that's made me a little bit sad about, as peaceful parenting, or conscious parenting, or gentle parenting, or responsive parenting, whatever you want to call it, as it's gotten more popular, I think there are people who are putting it into practice who don't totally understand it. And, that whole idea of kind, firm limits. I love that we unpack that with Dana. Just, it's not an excuse. It's not an excuse to control kids if you're just nice about it, right? It's not like
Yes.
authoritarian light. I won't yell. I won't use punishment, but I'm going to, quote, hold a boundary, which I don't like that language, or hold a limit, because I like my idea better and I'm the powerful one in the relationship.
Yes, that was a really good interview, and it's also Amanda Diekman's interview on low demand parenting is in the exact same vein, where it's how can we consciously decide what we can let go of so
Yeah.
that our child feels more safe and has more capacity. So all of those interviews are helping us to really not fill that backpack at home. We might not, and there's so many great interviews on like sending our children out into the world too, because we have to do that. And I love all those tweaks that we can do to help them. But there's also just so much we can do at home so that they have this more sturdy nervous system when they go out into the world.
I love that point that you just made, that it's like, we're not, I think, setting unnecessary or unreasonable limits or using our power over kids is going to be filling that backpack up, right? It's going to be filling up that backpack because they're not feeling, seen and heard and understood if we're not trying to work with them as a team. Like, I've really, like, started to just think about that more of, like, how can we be on the same team? Have you heard me talk about the analogy came up with about being a tour guide? Um,
No, please tell me.
yeah, so I was coaching. I couldn't remember where I was talking about this, but it was in a coaching call where we were talking about how to correct kids. Like, if you do need to correct them, like if they're doing something that they shouldn't be doing, think about yourself as like you're a tour guide in Thailand, and like you got to tell the people who are on the tour with you about the customs in Thailand, right? They don't know about the customs in Thailand. They don't know that you're not supposed to, for example, touch anyone on the head, or, different things that, like, how would they know? They've never been to Thailand before. So how would you tell that person who's on your tour, hey, we really can't do this because blah, 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 blah. And you're on their side and you want them to understand the world that they're in, right? And I think if we approach our kids with that idea of like, okay, I'm a tour guide in this world that they've only been living in for 4 or 5 years and they don't know all of the things yet, how would I communicate that to them?
I love thinking of it that way.
Yeah.
In my previous life as a museum tour guide, I can channel a lot of that, I
Yeah,
think.
totally. And you wouldn't like be upset with somebody in Thailand who didn't know the customs, right? So yeah, I don't know. I think that's kind of a nice way to think about when we're setting limits. Like that's how we want to do it is as that tour guide in Thailand.
Absolutely. So I would say my third big thing that I wanted to talk about today was, now this is a big thing, is feeding.
Yeah. And we do have an interview, which at the time that you and I are taping this, I haven't done it yet. So, but I looked, I looked for like 6 weeks for somebody who would come in and be the right feeding person for us because, well, I mean, you're going to say why we needed someone who was a little unusual. So go for it.
Yes. So this is going to be another story of me being in office hours with our membership and everyone coming to me with all these food questions. And our membership has gotten to know that I am someone who can answer food questions because I've been through so many feeding challenges in my own family with my neurodivergent child. So I'm their food person. And basically, once again, everyone was talking about the division of responsibility. So this is kind of the model that, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with this model. I'm just saying
If
it's
it works for
modeled
you, it works for you. And for
exactly.
anyone who
So
doesn't know what the DOR is, the Division of Responsibility, it was developed by Ellen Satter. And it's in many, many ways, it's an excellent model for feeding kids. And basically, the Division of Responsibility is that the parents decide, or parents or caregivers decide when the child eats, what the child eats, and where the child eats. The child's responsibility is they decide if they eat and how much they eat. And that those are the two divisions of responsibility for the parent and child. It's a little bit more, there are more details than that, but that's the basic idea. So the parents decide what the meal is. And the idea is nobody is going to go hungry. So there's always what they call a safe food on the table that your kid will eat, like whether it's like white rice or carrots or something like that. So that's the context that you're coming from, that you were trying to do, right? Is because
yes.
that's what we suggest in peaceful parenting, is we suggest that people follow the DOR. And anyways, take it from there.
Yes. So this is the model. I agree with you. Can be a really great model in a lot of ways. I worked with so many professionals, even occupational therapists, who also recommended the model. And it just didn't seem to be working in our house. And what I've learned since then is with sensory kids, they will literally starve themselves over eating something that is not right for them. And this idea of having a safe food needs to be a lot bigger than it is. It can't just be like, oh, you had a pile of rice for them. Like, I really need to have something that is filling, smells right, is easy for my child to eat at that table. And I started to realize that they also didn't necessarily eat on an easy timeline. And a big part of DOR is, you don't do like a lot of just snacking in between meals and things because you need to come hungry. Well, how hungry my child is really dependent on what kind of day they're having. So I found it really hard. I was having like all these power struggles over food and when we were eating and like, am I doing this right? And then I found responsive feeding, and it's, very similar, but just a few other tweaks where you really can have this ability to go with the flow more with
Mm-hmm.
what your child needs and like what they need in that particular day, and embracing the safe food and really embracing that. What does it look like for success for your child to eat? And it might not be what other children would call success, but it really is about like, I need to fill my kid's stomach. And it really does look different than what DOR is saying.
Well, and a lot of responsive feeding people still also combine that with the DOR, right?
Yes, they
So,
do.
so responsive feeding is like, just for anyone who doesn't know, and to correct me if I'm wrong, but it's trusting in your child's ability to know what their body needs and how much their body needs, and providing a wide variety of food and not prioritizing one kind of food over another kind of food. So it's not that we have like a hierarchy. There's not a hierarchy of food where some food is better than other foods, but all foods are considered equal and provided in varying like amounts and frequencies, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
So when office hours, I started telling everyone some of the responsive feeding people that I've been following and who'd been helping me. And just these small tweaks that they do are just a lot more friendly to children who have significant feeding challenges. And I watched a weight come off all of their shoulders in the same way that it has come off mine,
Mm-hmm.
because it gives me the ability to, one day my child does a safe food, the next day it's not. So I am not going to insist that they're eating that. I'm getting something else, and I'm making a second meal that day, and it's okay. And we're all going to be okay.
Well, and I think we have to remember that there's so much anxiety around feeding, and a lot of parents really feel like, well, if I don't get them, like I've had parents who say, like, if he doesn't try this new food, he's never going to eat other foods, or he's always only going to eat this food. And I think we have to remember that that's just not true at all. I've heard some people in the sort of the alternative to the DOR world that we're talking about borrow that when there was the big dilemma or debate over formula versus breastfeeding, and they had the breast is best thing, and then people came out and said change it to fed is best. I've heard people using that fed is best for our children, our complex kids, right? Like if they and talking about food accessibility, like if this food is accessible to them and they'll eat it, like that's good enough for right now.
Yes. And it's funny, when I had a baby, this whole fed is best thing didn't make much sense to me. I was just like, well, of course fed is best. We just need to make sure everyone's eating. And suddenly I found myself all stressed and confused and struggling, and I forgot that message that we don't need to just get all this pressure of specific foods, that really fed is best. And I lost sight of that. And I found responsive feeding gave me just a little bit of wiggle room to get back into that zone. And I know we're not looking for outcomes, but honestly, ever since I've relaxed and have moved in that direction, my child is eating more than they ever have before.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think that's a big lesson of, once I took all that pressure off of all of us, we
Mm-hmm.
were all able to relax and just eat.
Yeah, no, that makes so much sense. And I mean, and there's some things that you've told me about, like one your oldest child who has like the sound, he doesn't like the sound of his brother chewing. And it was so you struggled for so long to like have them be sitting together at the table, and otherwise they get along great. But you finally let him eat. I think he eats at a separate table now, right?
Yes. So
Yeah.
so we set up a whole separate table, but it was in our kitchen, and we just kept playing around until we figured out who was comfortable where. And everyone's now in their own little separate tables. That is not what we've been told is what it's supposed to be
Right. You're
like
supposed
for
to have
eat.
like the family dinner table.
But we have lovely conversations from table to table.
That's awesome. It's like you're
The
in a
other
restaurant having a
Yes.
conversation with the diners at the next table over.
Yeah. And the other thing that's cool about that too is we were able to set up like a little table where we could actually make it more supportive for our youngest child, where they could be, like sitting more, on a little wiggle cushion with like a little yoga block to put his feet on. So it allowed us to actually customize the whole sitting situation so everyone was more comfortable. My other child stands at the table while he eats.
Mm. Yeah, so that's the whole where part of the DOR that, maybe we didn't feel like we had any permission to do something that looked different.
Yes.
Yeah.
And also just knowing, I loved the talk that you did with she from NeuroWild, and
Mhm.
she talked about too something that this is what I told all the parents that day. So I loved having it confirmed by her, that you can also just throw out the window everything that we think about when you eat what.
Mhm.
So, I basically give my kids an amazing snack when they get home from school, and take all the pressure off of dinner. If they eat it, great. They don't, doesn't matter. They had this amazing snack. And that's what Em does with her family too. So
Yeah.
we don't have to follow these rigid rules about family dinners, and they have to be at this time, and we have to sit in this way. You can still achieve that overriding goal of connected time together and nourishment without it looking like everyone says it has to.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, so we have been on a journey, haven't we?
We
Just
have
in
been.
terms of so I don't think I mentioned this. I think I mentioned in the beginning that we were rebranding the business, and it definitely is not going to be complete yet because we didn't want to risk breaking my website in the middle of the conference. Like the new website is ready to go and it's beautiful, and our new business is called Reimagine Peaceful Parenting, but we're going to wait till after the summit to test out the new website just in case. But really, like, it's so funny, Corey, because I thought of that name not just because I like the sound of it. And then and that was like, I don't know, 6 or 8 months ago that I sort of thought of that name. And then the more we've been talking and the more we've been putting together the summit and all of these amazing guests who are really helping us to reimagine peaceful parenting, like reimagine peaceful parenting as how can and it's really accessibility. I think that's what we're talking about. Like, how can peaceful parenting work for people? Because you're right, we are still keeping the core things of not using punishments, of regulating our own emotions, of connecting with our child, of, setting kind firm limits, but making sure that those limits are limits that are meaningful and necessary, and not, just because we like them. Right. So it's really like the whole heart is still there. It's just that even if for some of our people, even if they're practicing that, and they're empathizing and they're welcoming feelings, their child's probably not going to melt into their arms in tears, which is what all the
Mm-hmm.
books say is supposed to happen. Right. And then we want those parents whose child is not melting into their arms in tears when they empathize. We don't want anyone to feel like this isn't for them, right? Or that they're doing it wrong, or that they're a failure.
Yes, this is still for everyone. We just have to reimagine what we're actually doing
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
The goals are the same. It just might look a little different.
Yeah. Yeah. And we never want to be the peaceful parenting police, which is what you coined that phrase one day when you said, well, we're not the peaceful parenting police. And for sure we're not. We want this to be like, I don't know, as beautiful as both of us have experienced it in our families.
Yeah, it's been really beautiful in my family. And, there's so many ups and downs. And there were points, especially when I started training with you to be a coach, where things were really hard in my house. And I was like, do I even deserve to be a coach? Things are still so hard here. But I think that's what's been so beautiful about this journey is that is not what is telling us whether or not we're being successful or anything like that. I was still planting all the seeds, as you like to say,
Mm-hmm.
and I see the results sometimes weeks or months later, even though we're going through patches that are really hard.
Yeah. And Beth in our membership, in one office hours, she was talking about how, her daughter is still like super intense. I mean, that's a thing. Like, peaceful parenting will not change your child from an intense child to a not intense child, right? Like, if you have an intense kid, they're going to be an intense kid at the end of the day, and that's amazing and beautiful and wonderful, and they're going to be like the coolest like adults in the room. But she was feeling like, I don't feel like what did she say? I don't feel like I'm making any progress. And I said to her, what if you could judge your progress based on like how you feel about how you responded in the moment, rather than what your daughter's reaction was to you? And she was like, oh my God. And she said, I feel like I am making progress then if I look at it that way. So I think that's really important. What we need to do when we're reimagining peaceful parenting is look at ourselves, which kind of comes back to the heart of peaceful parenting anyways, which is like, it's not really about our kid, it's about us. So like, can you feel good about what you've brought to, the interaction? Can you feel good about how you're showing up as a parent? And of course, we don't need to be perfect, but I think that's really what we want to be looking at, is not as you said, it's not the outcome. And the outcome might be great, but you might not see it right away. I mean, the outcome will be great, but it could take, months, weeks, months, years to see that outcome.
I think you talked about that really well in the interview with Debbie from Tilt Parenting. And she talked about that where, it can be hard to think that it may be a really long time before you're going to see the fruits of all your labor, but you will.
Mm-hmm.
So, how can you show up right now and love yourself as you are and your child as they are? And I think that's a really big theme, is that we don't need to change anyone. We just need to find out how we can bring some ease to all of our lives. And I think that's actually the heart of peaceful parenting for me, is how can I bring more ease for both me and the rest of my family?
Totally. Yeah. And with that, all of that, the giant dose of self-compassion, which is what we talked about with Dr. Stacey Thomas in the conference, is this giant dose of self-compassion. For it might be harder for you than it is for your neighbors or your sister-in-law or whoever. If it feels harder, it's probably because it is harder.
Yeah, and I will say that's actually why I think I love our membership so much, because I think what I really need and what all of our members need is to just keep being seen by other people. And I love that we have the chance to do that with each other. And I'm excited to do that on such a big scale with the summit, is
Yeah.
just to have all these people come together and be seen and know and validated that, yes, the struggles are there and they're hard, but you're still okay.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah. I love that. And we've been talking about the membership, and the membership is actually going to be doors open. Oh my goodness. Probably, I think, a week and a half after this podcast comes out. And we only open doors twice a year to welcome new members, so that we're not in constant like trying to get people to join mode, but we're really like, 51 weeks out of the year, we're just focused on supporting the members inside the membership. So whenever you're listening to this, there's always a wait list at sararosensweet.com/membership. Someday we'll be reimaginepeacefulparenting.com/membership, but it's not that yet. I think the doors will open like around the 19th of October, if I have my dates correctly. But if you're hearing it before then or after they're closed, there's always a wait list at sararosensweet.com/membership, and more information available there. Whew. That was a lot. Thank you, everyone. Was there anything, Corey, that you wanted to add that we didn't cover about sort of our idea of reimagining peaceful parenting for the parents of complex kids?
No, I think we covered it all. I'm just really excited to meet you all in the summit, and for any of you who want to join our membership, because it's a very special place, and those office hours are actually, to be honest, they're one of my favorite parts of my job. I love being able to be there with our community.
Yeah, me too. I love the membership too. And I love how, I think it's been about 4.5 years since I started it. And there are people who've been in it from the beginning, and everyone, they feel like friends to each other now. Like we have people who come in the office hours, like Lauren just came in the office hours yesterday to share a win that she had. She didn't have any questions. She just wanted to share with people something that she'd experienced, and people really like support each other. It's really lovely. So
yeah, it's really, really lovely.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks, everyone. Be sure to check out the summit if you are not already signed up. sararosensweet.com/summit. It is totally free to attend. After you sign up, you will also have a special offer that's given to you to be able to access everything ongoing. So look out for that, the VIP All Access Pass, which also has a lot of awesome bonuses from our speakers. And I'm just like so excited. I've been working on this summit since July. Corey's been working on it pretty intensely for the past month and a half. And we're both just like so excited for it to be out in the world, for all of you to share in all of the wisdom of all of the guest speakers that we've had on. Like, it's seriously, like, it's just, the lineup blows me away. So I hope everyone loves it and signs up for it. And thank you, Corey.
Thank you so much.
And we'll see you next time on the next episode of the Peaceful Parenting Podcast. Thanks for listening to this week's episode. I hope you found this conversation insightful and exactly what you needed in this moment. Be sure to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast platform and leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. Remember that I'm rooting for you. I see you out there showing up for your kids and doing the best you can. Sending hugs over the airwaves today. Hang in there. You've got this.